Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Contemplating a CMS Migration from Ektron to EPiServer, Real-World Experiences. Thank you for joining us, to everyone who has joined so far. So we will begin promptly in 5 minutes at 10 a.m. Central Time. Right now, you should be able to see slides on your screen. If you cannot, please feel free to call the GoToWebinar technical support at 1-866-962-6492. All right, and again, thanks for joining, and we'll get started in just a few minutes. Hello everyone and good morning and welcome to Contemplating a CMS Migration from Ektron to EPiServer, Real World Experiences. Glad you all could make it. My name is Matt Zellner and I will be your host for today's event. Again, if you're experiencing any technical difficulties joining the online session, please dial 1-866-962-6492 for GoToWebinar technical support. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode. Please note that as an attendee, you are part of a larger audience today. However, due to privacy concerns, we will not be sharing the attendee list. The presenters will be holding a Q&A session at the end of today's presentation, but feel free to ask as many questions as you'd like during the online session, and the presenters will answer as many as they can during the Q&A session at the end. And any questions we don't get to, we will respond to via email or phone. To ask a question during the session, simply go to the questions box located at the right-hand corner of your screen as part of the control console, type in your question, and click the send button. Keep in mind that the questions are sent to the presenters and to myself. And with that said, I'd like to move on to introducing our presenters for today, starting with Roy Chomko, President of Adage Technologies. Roy Chomko, our first presenter, is the president of Adage Technologies and co-founder. So Roy has over 20 years of experience in technology sales and consulting as well as in development. Roy is a true veteran of the CMS space, and he has extensive experience building websites using both Ektron and EPiServer. Our other presenter who will be joining us a bit later for the case studies is Teddy Fishbein. Teddy is the Director of Interactive Marketing at Northshore University Health System. Northshore University Health System is an integrated healthcare system serving the Chicago metro area. Teddy has firsthand experience completing a migration from Ektron to EPiServer with Adage, and he'll be telling us a little bit more about that later in the presentation. Your hosts for today, which that's me and Roy, are both from Adage Technologies, and Adage is a multifaceted development firm with experience designing and developing websites, mobile applications, custom software, and e-commerce solutions. A significant portion of our work involves building sites around the EPiServer CMS, and we are in fact the most experienced US-based EPiServer partner, and that comes out to more than 30 successful implementations. And this sort of work has garnered us the 2014 EPiServer Partner of the Year Award. This is the second time we've been honored with this award. And many of our sites have also received previous individual honors, including Marketing Site of the Year. Now that we've gotten to know everyone, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Roy. He'll review the agenda and begin the presentation.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, everyone, for attending our webinar today, and we're looking forward to sharing some of our experiences with you as we went through our journey, if you will, from custom CMSs into today, where we actually work on quite a few EPiServer sites. With our journey, I'm going to provide you understanding of our experience with CMS platforms, including Ektron and EPiServer in particular. Next, we'll cover what we know, the current state of Ektron and the EPiServer merger. Following that, we'll do some feature comparisons, which will provide a side-by-side view of several common CMS functions within Ektron and EPiServer. In the migration section, I'm going to lay out a few considerations if you're making the move from Ektron to EPiServer. We have 3 case studies of clients that we've converted from Ektron to EPiServer, including one of them from my co-presenter, Teddy Fishbein of Northshore. Finally, we will review questions from you, the participants, so remember to submit your questions through the question submission tool that is available through the webinar tool. So moving on, what do I need to know? Hint, don't panic. We're going to preface this with, if you're on Ektron now and you're enjoying a stable environment, you don't need to panic or change right now. This seminar is not intended to rush you into making a decision of any type. There's plenty of time to make this conversion. But if you're not happy with your current experience, you're considering upgrading or in a redesign process, make sure that you're moving forward correctly and not into old technology. That's what we're hoping to solve for you today, is give you a sense of what the Ektron to EPiServer migration might look like and some of the features that will be available to you in the EPiServer platform. So a little bit of our journey. This is where we're coming from. Our experience in the CMS space has spanned over 14 years. That's included a lot of different platforms that we've worked with. So as you can see on here, we've got about 8 different .NET CMSs that we've worked with, 1 open source, and 3 different .NET e-commerce packages. Those range obviously from EPiServer and Ektron to tools like Kentico and Sitecore and Braco, SharePoint, WordPress, Sitefinity, and .NET Nuke. And then, of course, the 3 commerce products, ASP.NET Storefront, BV Commerce, and then finally CommerceServer, which was formerly a Microsoft product, which has now been purchased by Sitecore. So again, we're hoping to provide some context in which to work within these different, and our experiences within these different platforms and how it pertains to the EPiServer product that's going to be in use today. So moving forward and talking about our journey, from 2001 to 2005, we primarily developed sites using a custom CMS, basically things that we coded ourselves. We built easy-to-use text boxes in web applications and sites, and that's really how we got started in this. We then transitioned to use Ektron's product in eWebEdit Pro. This is prior to actually using the full-blown content management system from Ektron. They have a tool that we could implement inside of some of the custom applications or websites that we had built. Somewhere around 2005, we completed our first Ektron site for a municipality, and that actually included a conversion from a Cold Fusion platform into the CMS.NET, CMS400.NET product. Moving forward, between the somewhere between 2006 and 2009, Ektron was really our go-to CMS. Through today, we've actually either implemented or supported approximately 30 Ektron sites, so we've got considerable experience with that platform. At the end of 2009, we began looking into some other CMS options due to issues that were experienced with the Ektron platform. EPiServer had landed in the U.S. at that time and had reached out to us for a review and to see if we were interested in picking up support of their platform, which we did. From 2010 and on, we've transitioned to EPiServer as our go-to CMS, completing over 30 EPiServer sites with 10 currently in development. And that leads us to the merger of the 2 firms, which we're really excited about. So in talking about Ektron, we wanted to kind of give what we felt were some of the good considerations that we had and some of the bad, and we're going to do the same for EPiServer. So talking about the good, in Ektron, when we first saw Ektron, we felt it was really easy to understand. It was easily recognized as the best .NET option available at the time from our perspective. Again, getting back to the eWebEdit Pro tool, it was one of the best editing tools out there that was available in working with sort of a WYSIWYG environment in the HTML world. They also provided an impressive array of options for the price, really very feature-rich, some very forward-thinking features that were available on the platform at the time. Some of the problems that we had actually lent itself to the features that were being added, because a lot of times they weren't actually fully fleshed out. And this became difficult when it came to upgrades, because in order to fix a problem or correct an issue, we had to go through an upgrade, which oftentimes caused some other problems. So we struggled with that for a number of years. In addition to that, a lot of times from a performance perspective, if we went to use the API, we ran into issues in terms of its performance and speed of the site, essentially, which is obviously critical as time went on with the websites in that era. A lot of people really felt that speed became more and more important as time went on, and it was less acceptable to have slow performance. Finally, from a development perspective, Ektron had a very heavy code-based footprint for development. This means that, as a comparison, they had about 180 megabytes of files, which included actually 10,000 files that became part of your Ektron web solution in Visual Studio. As a comparison, EPiServer is somewhere around 2 megabits and far less files as part of the base installation. So something that we ran into and we felt was something that really inhibited our ability to develop on the platform in a meaningful way. Moving over to EPiServer, when we began looking at an alternative to Ektron, what we found was an easy, consistent user experience in the EPiServer platform. We found it to be really developer-friendly. If someone understood the .NET framework as well as adhere to Microsoft best practices, EPiServer does a really good job of that. So if someone knew .NET, they were able to jump in and be functional in the EPiServer platform very quickly. Another plus that we've seen over the last 3 years is the integrated commerce approach that EPiServer has taken. They're really 3 years ahead, in our opinion, of anyone else in the space in terms of combining content and commerce together in one environment in a meaningful way. In addition, we've been through several upgrades right now, and they've worked as planned, so that's a real plus there, and it's a lot of consideration. We look at any CMS platform or software product out there in the market. Having your upgrades work as planned is really something that's a key differentiator. And finally, performance. We don't have to do a lot of tweaking to the EPiServer environment in order to make sure that the site's performing at a really high level. Some of the things, if I had to talk about anything bad about EPiServer, and it's really kind of hard for us to do because we're really big fans of the platform, but there is a slightly higher learning curve, I guess, for developers, because if you don't know .NET, then you're going to have to understand that. And I think that that's one aspect that some people maybe miss in the process. It's not something for a junior developer to just pick up. You do have to understand the .NET framework and understand the Microsoft tool set in order to be functional in a meaningful way. Finally, until now, EPiServer was not fully committed to the U.S. market, and don't get me wrong, they've made great strides over the years. But I think EPiServer, until now, we haven't really seen as large of a commitment from a sales and marketing standpoint that we'd like to see. And so we're really excited about the merger and what's happening now in EPiServer today. Which leads me to the next piece of our presentation, is talking about what we know today about the two companies and the mergers themselves. The new company, what it's going to look like, and this is what we know as of today. We've kind of scrubbed some of the news articles and other information out there, and so we're sharing that. If you're not already aware of some of this, wanted to share it again with you. Both companies are now owned by a private equity firm called Excel KKR. They have new leadership under Mark Duffel, who's an outsider. He was a formerly CEO of Kana Software as well as Epicor, both leading software companies. James Norwood also coming on board as the Chief Marketing Officer. He's functioned in a similar capacity as well in the marketing arena for both Kana and EPiServer with Mark Duffel. So a team that's comprised there of some real successful stories, and we're really excited about that piece of it. In looking at the sales and account management from Ektron, it looks like that's going to be primarily the group that's leading the effort here in the U.S. EPiServer had some presence in the United States with sales and marketing. They've done a really good job. But Ektron's been here longer. They've made some really good progress from a sales and marketing perspective, and so it seems that that team's largely taking over. If you're looking at the engineering and technical leadership, that's largely coming from EPiServer. They're keeping that intact. The teams that were in place in Europe and the U.S. as well as other places around the globe, those people are staying in place, and so we think it's really a great merger that's occurring here, bringing the best of both worlds from both a sales and account management function as well as the technical functions. I didn't want to go any further without talking a little bit about what the combined product will look like. So again, they're keeping the EPiServer technology stack intact. This means that everything, those of us that have been using EPiServer are really excited about, because we think it's just a great technology solution for anyone implementing either commerce or content or a combination of both. Specific features of Ektron will be preserved and actually incorporated into the platform. Some rumors and hints that we've seen is they're going to be incorporating pieces of eSync or the eSync product as well as the Digital Experience Hub. And we'll get into this a little bit later in the presentation and talk about specifically how we see that happening. They are committed to supporting both platforms for the foreseeable future. A big note here is they don't want to have any customers be forced into upgrades. So the idea is to keep everybody on the platform and eventually merge the two platforms together and bring everyone together. So again, a really great approach to making a combined company and product, and something that we think is going to really lead the way in the CMS space moving forward. One last note about EPiServer. 8.0 has been released as of last week, I believe. It's the first major release to use continuous releases. What this means is it's weekly updates. EPiServer is committed to doing that. This includes both fixes and features. Previously, new features would have taken possibly 1 year or longer to get into the code base. At this point, these updates are either going to occur if you're hosted with Ektron, or I should say EPiServer. They will be provided to you online automatically. Alternately, if you're doing your own hosting, these will be delivered via NuGet for customer-hosted solutions. So another new release or a new update that's kind of a bigger one is they provided updated browser support. So they've committed to supporting the last 2 releases of any major browsers that are out there. What this means for those of you using IE9 is that it's no longer supported. So something to take note of if you're on EPiServer and you're using IE9. In addition, EPiServer has pointed to a number of performance improvements they've made in the platform. Again, something we're really excited about and seeing because, again, the product really works very well and is very efficient, but any improvement's always exciting to see. Following that, one new feature we're really excited about is projects. Projects allows you to combine, I should say, a number of customers through the years have asked us if they could, when they're doing maybe a product release or some sort of new announcement, that they'd like to have a combination of pages and images and assets all go live at once. And projects not only allows you to both view those in a meaningful way so that you can send a preview of the site to a number of users or stakeholders, but you can also then time that release for all those content items at once to go live within the website. So a really cool feature that's coming out or is out now, and we're looking forward to actually getting our hands on it so we can implement it ourselves at some point. So we felt like a side-by-side comparison of features will allow you to better plan for your migration by understanding the names for features that both products use. Just a note, both screens that follow are based on Ektron version 9.1 and EPiServer version 7.5. Starting out with navigation, here we're comparing the main navigation of Ektron and EPiServer. As you can see, they are largely the same with minor exceptions. On the subsequent slides, we'll compare several of these in more depth. However, desktop really equals the dashboard from Ektron to EPiServer. If you look at the content item, it's really your ability to edit the CMS and edit in EPiServer. The library is a little different. It's a collection of media files in Ektron like images and audio and video. In addition, the library also contains assets, including documents such as PDFs, Word docs, and other file types. There's really no equivalent for EPiServer in the sense that it's not part of the main navigation. Again, we'll cover this a little bit later. But the media files are handled in a different manner, which we'll explore further down in the presentation. Settings really equals the admin, it's the same thing, and then reports are very similar in their functionality and capacity. Moving on to the desktop and dashboard view, as you can see here on the left, you've got a set of widgets here at the top that are really built. It's much like a Google Analytics custom page that you can build for yourself. The widgets are built so you can drag and drop them into the framework here on the page. You can create a 1-column, 2-column, or 3-column. And what that means is then you can create these customized dashboards based on your user specifically, not for everybody that's coming into the CMS, but really specifically for you and what you want to see. So different roles might be interested in different dashboard views. Over here on the right with EPiServer, we've got a blown-up example of how this is going to look. EPiServer approaches it really in the same way. It's a series of widgets that you can drag and drop into the page, and here I'm showing you a quick report on the visitor groups that we have coming to the Adage website, as well as some external links that are linking to the Adage site as well. So just a comparison. They're really very similar in the way that they function and their approaches to this, but worth noting. Moving on, I think the biggest difference in the two platforms that we've found over time is really here. It's how Ektron really organizes the content. They go with a folder structure, which allows you to drop content in any folder, but that does not mirror the site navigation. We found this to be somewhat confusing as we used Ektron, although it worked very well for a number of years. In comparison, the way EPiServer handles it over here on the right is that your navigation and how you find content really mirrors the site navigation overall and the site content structure. So finding content is where you might expect to find it. You'll notice that the views are a little different, and I should say, to be fair, there's another view within Ektron that we'll look at later called Page Builder, but they're really not incorporated or really integrated the same way. So what I've done here in this example is we're going to click on the privacy policy in this EPiServer demo site. And over here on the right, we've already actually clicked on the privacy policy page within EPiServer. Advancing the slides a little bit, you'll see that we've already clicked in. By clicking on the privacy, I've been able to highlight and actually begin editing. Over here on the left with EPiServer, I'm in a situation where I still need to click this edit button in order to edit the content on the page. So something that I think is a little bit more intuitive from EPiServer standpoint. You can navigate to the content. You can then go ahead and begin editing within the visual view of this page and get functional pretty quickly. Advancing the slides one more time here, I'm actually in the EPiServer edit mode. And again, I'm not really getting a visual representation of what this looks like, but I can go ahead and edit the content and save and publish my changes, much like I can in either environment. Again, here's a blown-up view of what the EPiServer privacy policy page in this example will look like. And the thing I want to note here is that we've got just some, rollover states that if you click on them or roll into them, you can see where the editable portions of the page are from a content management standpoint. Moving forward, I think the library and media sections are really different in their approach. So something I'd like to point out here on the left with EPiServer, or I should say Ektron, is that the library, again, mirrors the folder structure of the content. And this is something you can't control, as many of you Ektron users know. And on the right here, I've actually clicked on a folder, and I'm looking at the various image files that are available to me and the thumbnails of those images. Over here on the right, from an EPiServer perspective, is comparison. I'm going to give you a little bit more of a blown-up view here, but what we've done is we've actually hidden the navigational structure on the left of EPiServer, and we've exploded out the view of the folder structure here on the right for any type of media files that are available to me. What I think is really a distinct difference here as well is that we have complete control over the folders here. I can choose to make 1 folder, 5 folders, 25 folders. It's really unlimited in terms of number of folders that I can create in EPiServer and the structure of the folders that I want to use. So something that's a bit of a differentiator, again, from the Ektron platform and a bit of an adjustment from a paradigm shift. But it's something that we think is a lot more functional here. So I can organize my image files or my media files in any way that I want. A little bit further here, you can see that I've got the ability to upload folders or files by dragging and drop them in this drop zone. And then finally, I've got a representation of all the images that are available to me in this particular folder of awards. So I could actually drag and drop this and into one of these drop zones and right into the content here visually from the EPiServer platform. There's really one way of doing it. It's a great approach in terms of handling the image files in any type of what they call media files to put them into your content in your website. Progressing further, we've got a discussion around smart forms and page types. I think the biggest thing to point out here that's really interesting is that an Ektron smart form is a way of obviously creating content that which you have fields and field properties that are included within a page, and then you can build that page in any manner you like. EPiServer uses really every EPiServer page is a smart form. So if you're on Ektron today and you've got a lot of smart forms in use, those will likely transfer over into EPiServer in a very similar fashion. The migration should be fairly straightforward for you if you're migrating a lot of smart forms into EPiServer. There should be a one-to-one match in that respect. Further digging into what this looks like here, as you can see, we've got 2 case studies that are showing here within the Ektron and EPiServer examples. What I wanted to note here is if I progress the page, one click here, I've actually clicked into the content here on the left. What I've done over here on EPiServer, if I actually click this button, I've toggled into what is considered to be from the visual view or the page view into these the page type view. So I can go back here and I can actually start editing the content much like I would a smart form, or I could do it visually by toggling back to the visual view. Some other notes that I'd like to make here is that in this case we can click on the header image, case study preview, SEO, or any other settings for this particular page, or I can click in and edit content. We do this and we can actually customize these tabs based on any page type that we create within the EPiServer environment. This is something we commonly do when we're building out pages within EPiServer. A bit more of an exploded view here. Again, we've got the ability to modify just some of the higher level page properties related in EPiServer, as well as some of the content here on the page itself. Moving forward, I'm talking about folders and taxonomies and menus. I think it's important to note here that they really the 2 products approach this a lot differently. In Ektron, as we mentioned earlier, your options for organizing content in folders is customizable, but it does not mirror or reflect what the organization of your content on your website is. So it's a bit of a paradigm shift again. As you can see in EPiServer, all of your content is organized in a way such that it's mirroring the navigation on the site. One note is that you can actually choose to not display a page or have it appear, and thus it will not appear in the menu structure, and it actually won't be available for anyone to get to as far as the page itself. In EPiServer, or I should say Ektron, we actually have to create the menus in a separate category. And then last but not least, I wanted to mention something about taxonomies, because the way that we used to use taxonomies in building Ektron sites was for content reuse and page reuse, so that one piece of content could appear in multiple places on the site. The way EPiServer handles that is through this concept of shortcuts. So we can actually create a shortcut and use some of the page properties of a new page, but we can also fetch specific content from a page within the EPiServer CMS. This doesn't mean all of the content on the page. I can actually just go and fetch actually content from one object that's on the page. It could be an image, or it could be a content block. It can be a number of different items or objects that appear within that EPiServer CMS, but I can grab it and then use that to reuse on my site on any other page within the EPiServer environment. In addition to that, you might ask, how can I create categories within EPiServer? There is a feature here for content to add categories and actually assign content to those categories. This is something that we typically use when we're trying to build out a product catalog where maybe there's not a heavy e-commerce functionality going on, but we do need to have that representation of products falling into categories. So you can see how that's a really kind of a different shift in terms of the two platforms handle the concept of folders and taxonomies and menus. Talking about page builder, pages and blocks, as noted earlier, Ektron does have a visual representation. The way that you get to it is that you go to the main site, and then you can actually switch your view to actually begin editing within the page builder model. It's a bit of, again, of a shift in terms of how EPiServer handles it, because there's one way of getting at the content within the work area and editing the content in a visual way, or, again, toggling back to that page view, if you will. In the page builder model, what happens here in Ektron is I can click on my content item or the type of widget that I'd like to drop in and place it in line with the page. Looking at how EPiServer does this is, as you can see here, I've got the option for page blocks. Page blocks can be comprised of really just an image, or it can be a set of content. It can be actually something that's functional that might draw a list of information from another portion of your site, or actually inside of the commerce or the content management system itself. What I'm showing here is that I can take any block. It's organized into folders, much like media, and I can come down here, I can take that block, and I can drag and drop it into a hot zone on the page. Again, very similar as I might do with an image, but in this case I'm dragging a content block or item into the page anywhere I want. So a really neat feature, something that's been released as part of the 7.0 plus release of EPiServer, and we found this to be really effective and really takes a big piece of how we implement pages and sites today within EPiServer, making it a lot more functional and flexible for the users as we design each page. Talking about search, obviously we can't get away without talking a little bit about search and how the two platforms handle it. Search is similar in many ways. Both products contain out-of-the-box search functionality that can be incorporated into the site. A lot of times this does not match up with what our users or our customers want to have implemented on a site. What we found also is that both integrate and work with a variety of search platforms relatively easily. So again, an alternate approach to how you want to incorporate search into your site. We've integrated both with both products, the Microsoft Search Server in the past, as well as tools like Google Site Search and either the Google appliances that are available today. So we've done that, as well as a couple other third-party search tools that are out there. One note about EPiServer Find, it's a product that's offered as an add-on to EPiServer. I think it's something that's worth exploring if you're looking for more advanced requirements from a search perspective. It provides faceted search, so as an example, it will then allow you to categorize and organize content, and then once the search results are displayed, users can then filter or modify those search results to get something a little bit more categorically relevant to what they're searching for. So a really neat feature. We've implemented it a couple times now and really find it to be a really valuable tool for larger, more advanced sites that require that level of search functionality. Moving on to persona and personalization. Persona management in Ektron, if you've been using it, really is just the ability to provide targeted content to a user. So based on certain actions they've taken either off your site and how they've come to your site, or they're actually navigating your site, we can serve up specific content to them. And in this example, we've got a pizza promotion. So if someone's come with a URL term that includes the word pizza, or contains Italian, then we can actually serve up the specific pizza promotion to them. In a very similar manner Ektron EPiServer works. So you first start by creating a visitor group. In this case, we're going to drill down and look at our EPiServer example. So as I look at this, I've got EPiServer here, if it appears either in the referrer name, or it's in a search keyword, or the actual URL contains the word EPiServer, we're going to serve up specific content to this user group. And as an example here, you can see that visually I can come in here and I can actually take a look at the visitor group, highlight EPiServer, and what it's going to do is it's going to show me what content's being displayed to this particular visitor group. So in this case, we can then take advantage of showing the fact that we've done over 30 EPiServer sites and counting, and we're also advertising for this particular webinar for anyone that's got EPiServer in the keyword. So a really simple but extremely powerful tool that we've deployed in some pretty complex ways for a number of our different customers. One of the really neat features that we see in Ektron that we've worked with in the past is eSync. It's something that provides the ability to do what's called MicroSyncing. That means you can either sync your entire site, individual content items, templates, or code. It's actually bidirectional, and you can actually sync that scheduling. It's very mature. It's been out in the marketplace for a number of years. But it does require extensive monitoring in terms of upkeep and operation. So we're excited to see that move into the EPiServer platform. As a comparison, EPiServer's closest feature is called mirroring. As a comparison, it's got limited micro-syncing capabilities. There are certain content blocks, index, and pages, and dynamic content plugins that you can mirror. However, it's really only recommended for one-way sync, and two-way is possible. But again, it's only recommended for a one-way sync method. In addition to that, you can do some sync scheduling as well. It's relatively new in terms of its release cycle. It's currently in its second version. So feel that we understand eSync will likely become part of EPiServer, and that feature will be moved into it, and we're really looking forward to see some advanced functionality there within the EPiServer platform. Moving on, I'd like to talk a little bit about the EPiServer add-on store. This provides a nice way to simply expand the capabilities of your content management platform with third-party add-ons. As a comparison, Ektron has what's considered to be widgets that can be custom built, but what's great about EPiServer is they provide this online community at world.episerver.com that allows you to go ahead and either acquire these products for free and add them to your site, or also be able to purchase them from third parties. So a really neat tool and approach to allowing you to expand the core capabilities of the platform with third-party add-ons. In talking about Ektron, what has also been mentioned as part of some of the discussions we've had with EPiServer is that it looks like the Digital Experience Hub and the connectors, that model is going to be moved into EPiServer as well. What Ektron's done a great job of is they've gone out and with a number of different digital marketing automation tools as well as CRM tools and some content tools such as SharePoint, they've created this inbound connector within the tool set that allows it to connect into Ektron. This same model or the same concept will be implemented, as far as we understand again, into the EPiServer framework, so that we'll have this same feature set and allow these different types of tools to be built around it. I think the biggest thing to point out here is that both Ektron and EPiServer prior to the merger agreed that the better approach is to build out a better ecosystem, and so allow that to use best-of-breed products. What has happened in, I think, some of the competitor space, and I'll point out Sitecore and Adobe CQ, they're moving more towards what I would consider to be a product suite approach, where you're buying all this functionality in one set product, and that it's a very feature-rich environment, but it also means that you're buying into the way that they're doing things. And a lot of our customers have already invested a lot of money in things like Microsoft CRM or ExactTarget or SilverPop. So I think the approach here from an ecosystem standpoint provides best of breed and really is the way to go from a add-on model. So what do I need to do in terms of planning for a migration? There is no magic button. I want to make the distinction here that there's a difference between upgrading and migration. So if you're within the same code base and you're upgrading within EPiServer today, it's fairly straightforward. Migration's a different story because you're going to have a lot of considerations to make here, and that's what we're trying to point out here. So moving forward, just some considerations to make. Licensing is probably number one. You want to make sure that are you current on your maintenance plan with Ektron? If you are, then we've been told that you'll be able to receive like-to-like upgrades. And this is really not a should not be an issue. But you do want to check with your Ektron, or I should say EPiServer rep, to make sure that this is in fact the case. And in fact, your situation may be unique, so it's something that you should probably explore. Talking a little bit about content migration, a lot of questions that we get from our customers is, can't we just pump the data in? And the answer is usually a big maybe. I think the biggest consideration here is, are you changing the design? And is that design really just a reskin, or are you actually planning on changing your templates? Another consideration might be, how are you are you changing your content strategy at all for your site? Because that's also another piece that needs to be taken into consideration as you consider your content migration. As you can see, you've got to deal with pieces like smart forms and templates and content items, and how are those going to translate into EPiServer. There's a couple options that you have. You can either use migration tools. There's a number of third-party tools out there. We've actually built our own in a number of cases, as well as there's some, Ektron's or EPiServer has been talking about providing some form of migration tool as well. Another option is just really simply doing it manually. So that's something that should be considered as part of your content migration plan. It may be less expensive and simpler to everything manually move it over. Or perhaps there's a hybrid approach, and that means perhaps dumping in all of the content into the EPiServer framework and then perhaps moving them manually into where you want it to go within the site's content structure of your new site. I think it's really important to note as a final piece here is that someone needs to touch every page. It's really important to have that human visit the page, take a look at it, and make sure that all the images have been transferred over properly, that they're appearing the way that they should. Specific content or even characters have been moved over, or there has been some odd paragraph tag that may have been in a piece of content along the way. So it's going to become critical that someone still needs to review every page as part of this process. Something else that we get a lot is, can I save the code? And again, the big answer is maybe here. What we tried to illustrate here is an example of the types of pages that you might have inside of your solution. Not every site, or I should say very few sites, have just the content management component to it. Many times we're building out custom integrations, and that's what we're pointing out here is there are pieces of the code that can be salvaged and some that have to be completely rewritten. So if you look on the left here with the Ektron database, we actually have a template that might have been built for the Ektron environment, and that's actually pulling just the content from Ektron. In that case, the template's going to have to be rebuilt. In the case of something where you've got more of a hybrid approach on the page, where you're pulling some content from the Ektron database, but maybe in this example you're pulling some of the events that you've got stored in your ERP database that you want to put in on that same page that you're making a custom call to that API within the ERP. That code won't likely need to change, but again, the code that you're using to pull the menu structure and perhaps some of the navigation items from Ektron, or even some of the content, that will have to be rewritten or refactored in some manner. Finally, if you've got a page that might be like a My Account page as part of a portal that's really either standalone or it can be actually part of the Visual Studio project, but it's pulling all the data from the ERP database, that's something that you can bring into the solution within EPiServer, and really it will coexist there and should not require a lot of rewriting, although we would probably suggest that you factor in some sort of code refactoring process as part of that effort, because it never hurts to go back and refactor your code. Last, I think that we would a suggestion is to conduct an Ektron audit. A good place that we feel to start that we do typically is to measure the total number of templates, the total number of smart forms, the total number of content items, assets, and media and / image files that you're planning to port over. This will give anyone that's doing a content migration plan for you a sense of the type of effort that's going to take to make this conversion. It's a good place to start. It's not the final, what I would say, it's not a 100% in terms of how much information is going to need to be gathered. There's certainly going to be require additional discovery efforts to figure out exactly how much Ektron content can be ported over, the best method for doing that, and actually doing some deeper dive into the discovery process in terms of how to best approach this. Okay, so I'm at case studies here. I'm going to transfer it over at this point over to Teddy and allow him to give you a high-level overview of how their content migration from Ektron to EPiServer went. And with that, I'll hand it over to Teddy.
All right, thank you very much, Roy. So I've been at Northshore now for about 7 years. My background is in technology. I joined Northshore as a web applications developer. Over time, my role has significantly changed. I now have oversight of all technology, content, and advertising in support of Northshore's digital marketing efforts. Northshore is a fully integrated healthcare system of 4 hospitals and over 100 physician offices. We have nearly 100 service lines that you can kind of view as individual business units or product lines, from cardiology to neurology to dermatology, gastroenterology, and on and on. And what this means is that we have a very large content-heavy website with sections designed to appeal to patients and consumers for each of these respective areas. And to keep this content up to date, we have content authors assigned to each department with responsibility to update these sections. And these content authors' technical skills span from incredibly basic, people who know how to send an email if you can open the application and put their fingers on the keyboard for them, to people with much more sophisticated levels of technical knowledge. When I joined, we were on the Ektron platform, and we had been for a couple of years. I participated in several minor updates and a few major upgrades over the first couple of years with Northshore, and these upgrades had varying degrees of success and varying degrees of frustration that they introduced for us. Typically, we'd look at an individual update or upgrade as it was presented from Ektron, and there were a couple considerations about why we would potentially implement it. One is, does it fix existing bugs that are driving us crazy? And the second was, does it introduce any new functionality that we might want to take advantage of? And in most cases, when Ektron would come forward with something, it looked very appealing to us. Roy talked earlier about eSync, a technology that lets you migrate content between sites. We actually went through a couple different iterations with EPiServer on a couple different products related to this functionality. One was called site replication, and that product, we tried it out, and it wasn't quite reliable enough for us. It would work sometimes, but not all the time. And then we tried eSync, and again, it was not 100% reliable for us. Roy mentioned that it's a very mature product now, and that's likely true. At the time, it was brand new when we were trying it out, and it just didn't give us exactly what we needed. Our site I mentioned is a very content-heavy site. We had the Ektron CMS, but we also have a lot of custom functionality built into the site. A physician finder, location finder, a homegrown events calendar. And so we had a pretty complex site. And some of the challenges introduced by this, Roy mentioned that the Ektron code base was very large. And this made it very difficult to integrate our custom development with it. And we ended up with a huge product that we ultimately were trying to deploy on a relatively routine basis. And working in that, the files loading up in Visual Studio and migrating the entire site over to our production servers every time became a pretty complex endeavor. When we started thinking about potentially migrating to a new platform, it was for a few considerations. One, it was that when we introduced updates and upgrades, we would often fix bugs, but then we found new bugs introduced. And many times it was with the core editor itself. Ektron built this proprietary editing tool several years ago, and at the time, it was probably the most capable WYSIWYG editor on the market. But whenever we would go through updates, we would find new bugs with it. The editor would add additional markup when you would try to save. It would replace particular components of the HTML markup, and it became a cumbersome process every time we wanted to update. As I mentioned, the site replication and eSync weren't incredibly reliable for us. They weren't really meeting that need. And the duration of upgrades became longer and longer as we would have to work through these issues. So with a editor that introduced issues and content authors with all sorts of degrees of technical knowledge and some with very limited skill sets, having these sorts of issues was too challenging for us. And we decided to start looking at the market and see what else was out there. So we approached Adage, who had been partners of ours for a while and worked with us on the Ektron side, and asked what kind of other systems they thought might be worth exploring, and EPiServer was one that they had just started talking with and brought to our attention. And as we sat down with them and started talking with them, we noticed pretty quickly that their focus was on the core content management piece. And they use a editor, TinyMCE, as the core for that, which is an open source product which has had thousands and thousands of eyeballs on it over the years. And so we were very confident that that piece that was so crucial to supporting our website and with such a focus for the EPiServer product was a good alignment for us. And as we got more familiar with the EPiServer offering, we ultimately decided that it seemed like the right platform to move to. And with the consideration that the Ektron upgrades took so long, we actually looked at the migration at that time to EPiServer as not a considerably bigger time and resource investment for us, and ultimately felt that once we got onto the platform, we'd be in much better shape. We decided to strictly do a focus on a data migration and migrating to the new platform, but not on any redesign of the website. We have since gone through some significant redesigns of the website. About a year and a half ago, we initiated a fully responsive redesign, which I would say was probably a more intensive process for us than doing the Ektron to EPiServer migration was. We had Roy mentioned that one of the first things to do is to do an inventory of the products. And on the next slide here, you should be able to see that we did this inventory as well to look at what we needed to migrate. And we had a good amount of templates. We had a handful of smart forms that we ended up rebuilding as X forms in the EPiServer platform. But we had a significant number of overall content items. And even with the complexity of our site, a lot of custom code integrated with the CMS product, the project really only took under 4 months to complete. And since then, our upgrade from 6.2 to 7.5 took probably, the upgrade process from 6.2 to 7.5 took probably a couple weeks to do. If we had not been doing a responsive redesign of the site in conjunction with that, it would have been just a couple weeks to get up and running on that. But overall, I would say that the experience on EPiServer has been fantastic for us. The content management solution is very easy to use. It has great features to preview changes in content for people who are less sophisticated with technology. And for our developers, it's been wonderful to extend the capabilities of that and integrate a lot of our custom code much more seamlessly into the overall project.
Thanks, Teddy. So I'm going to take it off over from here. We've got 2 other case studies to take a look at. Adage works with a lot of performing arts groups, and we've done 2 conversions from Ektron to EPiServer to a number of performing arts groups in around the country. Right now, for this particular we actually began a conversion back in 2012 for a lot of similar reasons that Teddy mentioned for this particular client. They were having problems with various departments wanting to edit content and being able to push the content edit capabilities out to them. In addition, they've got a lot of custom code, and specifically e-commerce. As you might imagine with the performing arts groups, they have to, many of them don't use something like Ticketmaster to do their ticket purchasing. They actually run off of a product called Tessitura, which is handles all of their ticket sales, seat reservations, memberships, donations, you name it. They've got a lot of different products moving through the content and the commerce piece in addition to be able to show a really vibrant website that provides the information about a particular upcoming performance. So there's a lot to consider there. There's no changes in designs again on this one. They felt it was a better approach again just to move from one platform to the other. There's limited changes to the templates. And finally, again, as I mentioned earlier, there's lots of legacy code, and I put that in parentheses because it's really not that old, but in today's, the way the internet and things move today, it moves pretty quickly, obviously. So some of it was rather old, and we had to work with some refactoring efforts in there to make sure that it worked well in the new site. As a comparison to the Northshore example, they had a large number of templates, 32 to be exact. They had smart forms at 17. They had a large number of content items, and this really gets back to the number of smart forms and how they were working with them in terms of the performance information. As you might imagine, again, those performance pages are very heavy in terms of different types of content, and the way it's segmented out created a very large base of content. They have about 55 assets, so really not that many essentially PDFs that are on the site, and a large number of media images that had to be converted over. This particular project took just under 2,000 hours, so again, it really had a lot to do with that e-commerce component that we had to make sure was functioning within. There's a lot of ties, I guess, to say the least, between the previous Ektron CMS and what we had to actually make work with EPiServer at the end of the project. It took about 6 months to complete this one, but again, they're a very happy client. They have mentioned a number of different times how satisfied they are with the EPiServer platform. And the migration actually went off fairly smoothly over time, something that, again, we're in the process of actually redesigning the site right now on EPiServer. Our third example is Architectural Systems. They're out of New York. They're a manufacturing and distribution of interior finishes firm. This project began back in July of 2013. It is an Ektron CMS and e-commerce, so before they were using Ektron CMS and e-commerce, and they've migrated over to the EPiServer platform that combines, obviously, commerce and content. There's been minimal changes to design and templates. So again, similar approach. Let's not change much from a design standpoint. Let's migrate over to the new platform and then look at a redesign. But certainly something that can be contemplated in any migration effort. As a comparison here, this particular site had 22 templates. They had 8 smart forms, about 1,300 content items, so not that large. A large number of assets, though, as you might imagine. They probably, there's a lot of material spec sheets, that type of thing that has to be downloaded on this site. And also a lot of media and images, too, so that came into consideration. So you can see the numbers vary, but the project took, again, just under 1,000 hours and 5 months to complete in this case. A little bit longer. There's a lot of data that had to be worked through, a lot of changes in terms of how the content was structured from an e-commerce standpoint. So I think there were some challenges there that we overcame, and it turned out to be a really beautiful site. And again, we're really pleased with the EPiServer platform in terms of the ability to get in and edit content. So in summary, we're wrapping up our discussion here today. Don't panic. This is something that can be planned for as long as you're taking it with a methodical approach. There's no need to rush into it. That's really our primary message here today is do some planning, do some thinking, lay out your plan, talk to some partners. If you're unhappy with Ektron or thinking about a change, we really, really heavily believe EPiServer should be your next step. It's a great platform. There's no magic button for migration. Tools can help, but again, a reliable partner is key, as well as contemplating exactly how you're going to do it and planning out the process in a meaningful way. EPiServer's easy-to-use interface and innovative features really do make it a clear choice over Ektron as far as we're concerned, and more than worth the migration that you might be considering at this time. Some next steps. What should I be doing next? First, figure out your timeline. As we mentioned earlier, conduct a content audit. Another important step is to actually contact your EPiServer rep for details in your particular situation in terms of licensing. And then finding an implementation partner to discuss how to approach a migration is a key point here. There's a lot of qualified partners in the EPiServer and Ektron space, so I think either using your current partner or looking elsewhere is certainly one approach. I think that also Ektron or EPiServer has stated very clearly that they want to be part of this process and help anyone they can in any way to make sure the transition goes smoothly. So feel free to reach out to EPiServer or your Ektron rep in those cases as well. Okay, so wrapping up, we've got a little bit of time here for questions. So I'm going to turn it over to Matt to let us know who's submitted some questions and what we can answer here in the next 5 minutes.
Great, thanks, Roy. So we are in the question and answer portion of the presentation, so I'd like to remind you that if you do have any questions, feel free to submit them through the question tool as part of the GoToWebinar toolbar, and we'll try to do our best to get through those. We don't have too much time, so still be sure to ask your questions, and we will be sure to respond to them via email or a call afterwards to make sure you get the answers. All right, Roy, we'll start with one right here that I think is a good place to start. This one just asks, what would you say is the overall most important consideration when it comes to approaching the migration?
I think the biggest consideration is do your planning, right? Take an audit of the content. That information is available in the Ektron database. Go ahead and have one of your people or your partner take a look at the information that's contained there. There's some simple queries that can be done to find out the different types and the amount of content that's in there. I think that's one piece of it. In addition, doing some heavy discovery about what your plans are and how you want to move forward with your project, if it includes some sort of different change in content strategy, or is there going to be a change in your overall content organization on your site. These are some considerations along with, in fact, quite obviously the design and the template changes. All of this, taking a look at these items and planning for that will help to provide a more smooth migration into EPiServer over time.
Great, thanks, Roy. So now we'll move on to another question. You addressed a number of content migration options. What would you say is the normal course of action?
So the normal, I guess the answer to that is that there is no normal course of action. What we found is that it's a lot of times we can use some sort of data import tool to make that content migration go somewhat quicker if there's a large amount of content. But again, it's usually a hybrid approach where there's got to be a lot of manual intervention as well. Somebody has to go in and review those sections. Something that does help is if you can categorize or put content in the various departments or put in different people's hands so that they can be those people that are reviewing the content to make sure that it's come over properly and organized in a way that makes sense for the new content strategy on your site.
Great, thanks, Roy. And I think we have time for probably one more question, and this one's just going down the list. Why the choice for EPiServer to use the Digital Experience Hub from Ektron?
This gets back to the idea of a product ecosystem or an ecosystem versus a product suite. In terms of the approaches of the two companies, if you look at Ektron and EPiServer, as I mentioned earlier, they're moving forward in the same approach and creating this ecosystem where you can use a best-of-breed approach with the tools that are out there. And again, companies have very significant investments in the tools that they've used from a digital marketing suite, CRM implementation, as well as some other content products that are out there. So allowing customers to live within those environments and use those existing tools that they've already invested heavily in is something that both Ektron and EPiServer are committed to. On the other side of the coin is you've got right, and the product suite is going to try and pull you in and make you use all of those tool sets, and you're paying for that functionality as well as that heavy code base that might come along with it. So I think there's just a different mindset and a different approach in terms of how the Ektron EPiServer merger and how that combined company and EPiServer is approaching the market versus some of their competitors.
Great, thanks, Roy. I think that's all the time we have for questions for right now. So I apologize if we didn't have a chance to get to your questions, but please expect a response shortly via email. So we'll make sure to get through all of these. And then to clarify, I know this is a question for a number of people, all attendees today will receive a copy of the slides via email, as well as any other resources they would request. And then you can see we have Roy's contact information here, so if you'd like to reach out to Roy about a specific question or specific migration, feel free to send him an email, or you can call this Adage number to be connected with one of our consultants here. All right, thanks again to our presenters, Roy and Teddy, and thank you for everyone for attending the webinar, and please feel free to follow up. Thanks, everyone.